Well, thank you very much. Those were four extensive topics. It's hard to imagine that we've put across so much information in such a short period of time. Please, if you have questions, enter them in the box. I'm watching them pop up on the screen, and I will call on a few. Let me see. I guess this one is for Ramesh, whom I hope is on the line with us. Do we see such adoption of holistic hospital integration of AI from our adult colleagues in the ICU? I think actually I'll give that to both Ramesh and Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Randall, and thank you for the question. The question relates to, do we see this notion of holistic hospital optimization from the adult side? I think the notion of this holistic hospital optimization and thinking of ICUs more than an individual system, but a system within a system, as we talked about the operating room, ED, etc. That's actually been well described. Actually, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement has workshops and several courses on this notion of hospital optimization. The point is that that's typically been described in the quality improvement realm. It's also subsequently been looked at in detail in the management sciences operational research realm. And the example I use at the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, along with Dr. Rice, attempted at linking the paradigm of management sciences with quality improvement in practice. I think the specific question, has it been used in the artificial intelligence realm? I believe there's some initial work that's happening. It's not in full mainstream, but the work is well on its way. So I think in the upcoming days and months ahead, we're going to see more of it. So clearly, it's not that it's mainstream, but it is being used in the adult side in pilot spaces. And I think the AI paradigm can learn a lot with the prior work in management sciences and quality improvement. Tom, I don't know if you have any other insights from your perspective.
I would agree, Ramesh. I think most of the work that I'm familiar with has basically been in limited areas, primarily using the management sciences rather than AI at this point.
Thank you. I think we have quite a few questions, so I think I'll move on to the next one and try and give everybody an opportunity. But I'm going to be selfish because Dr. Michael Forbes has asked the question of Matt Scanlon that I was about to ask. But Dr. Forbes does tell Matt that it was fantastic information. I'll say I was a little depressed by the talk, Matt. Where would you propose a PICU start? Please. Human factors engineering as a facet of how we address QI. If you are aware of where such expertise has been embedded or used, and have they been able to demonstrate additional value? And if you can remember those first two questions, I'm going to give you a third one. Do you have any ideas how VPS could help facilitate that among the 150 ICUs that participate?
So Randall, in reverse order, no, but I'll think about it. As far as the issue of human factors engineers, or HFE, the first thing I would say is having a human factors engineer at your place is a bit like having a dog. It doesn't tell you anything about their expertise or what the dog's like, not to compare them too much, but human factors engineers have different content expertise. And what's interesting to me is many of them know nothing or very little about safety itself. So it's not an either or. There's a great paper, and I don't remember the full title, and I'm happy to provide it to people if they're interested, called Strangers in a Strange Land, which is about the challenges of human factors engineers working with healthcare. And one of the issues is that there's a difference in language. There's organizational resistance to their suggestions. We had a human factors engineer in Milwaukee who was essentially windowed. Anytime she made uncomfortable or unpleasant recommendations, she was removed from those committees. So unless the organization is serious about it, I would say don't waste your time. If at your microsystem of the PICU, you think you can actually do that, I think they can offer tremendous insights. But part of it is starting with what are your major issues and who are the content expertise partners you would look to. Consultants are dangerous. in this realm, I really think one strategy is looking at your local universities and seeing if you have industrial engineers, psychologists, or human factors engineers who might be able to partner where they're doing work that helps them with their career, but also helps you with improving your program.
Thank you.
And I can get a list of places. Ken Catchpole in South Carolina. I know Texas Children's has some. I believe CHOP has some human factors engineers. Johns Hopkins. But how you collaborate with them varies widely from institution to institution.
And your paper, Stealing from Robert Heinlein's Strangers in a Strange Land, its first author is Perry Catchpole, second author, and it's Professional Factors Engineering. Easily found online for everybody. Thank you. Anybody else want to respond to that question? Right. I'll move on to something a little bit different. We have a question from Dr. Krishnamurthy. And he asks about limited resource countries. We are often so self-focused and forget that there's a whole world out there that would benefit perhaps even more than we would. Any suggestions how they should go about it? This is particularly about Barbados. And I'm sure that any of us would volunteer to come down and give a talk in Barbados to give them advice. See if I have any takers. I think that one showed up actually during Ramesh's talk. And Ramesh, do you have any thoughts?
Randall, I'm sorry, there was a little audio issue. I missed the last part. Could you kindly repeat the question again, please?
Advice for resource limited environments. Now, actually, I think I'm going to say to that is every healthcare environment is resource limited. Even in the fantastically wasteful of resources United States. We all have trouble getting the resources we need to do what we think is best for healthcare.
Yeah. So Randall, in response to the question, I think the question is, how do we engage some of this work in situations where there's limited resources? I would submit and would request the other panelists to weigh in. I would submit that I think this is a problem, Randall, as you correctly point out, not just for certain countries or certain parts of the world, but I think it's a global problem. I've never been in an institution that has got infinite resources. There's always limited resources. It's just a matter of perspective, right? So I think a couple of ways of addressing it, at least in my opinion, I think things like how do we accelerate artificial intelligence? I think we can accelerate artificial intelligence by linking it to quality improvement. And that was in part a point made in the presentation earlier, but also showing the outcome, the value, which many people in the business world would call as a ROI, or return on investment. So if we are investing in a certain system, a certain process, what's the predicted ROI? And then importantly, taking the next step and demonstrating that that ROI has been realized. And if it's not been realized, where did we fall short? So I think by being able to make that quote unquote business case, linking it to QI, I think there's a greater chance of adoption of such efforts and being able to attract resources even in settings of limited resources.
I think the other thing to point out is that in any setting, no matter how resource limited there are, you have to be answering questions that are relevant to the environment. For example, we have high infant mortality and high maternal mortality in a country. Coming up with an AI system that reduces the late discharges from an ICU is not exactly where the country needs to be spending its resources. You need to use this science and apply it to the issues that are most pressing to improve overall healthcare.
Randall, if I can just add another point, it just occurred to me. I think all of us, no matter which walk of life we are in around the world, I think most people have an iPhone, right? So how do we, in a situation of a limited personal or professional budget, make sure that we keep up with the latest iPhone technology, continuously upgrading that? Because we see a value we see a direct value of using that technology to our day-to-day functions. So to your point, Randall, I think by being able to link it to the questions at hand, making it relevant, but importantly, demonstrating that value or that ROI, I think is one approach.
Thanks, Ramesh. Tom?
I was just going to say, I think, you know, there certainly is differences in resources from country to country. One thing, however, is that if you're in an ICU, you probably have more resources than the people outside your unit. So within your particular environment, you are, quote, resource rich compared to your other beds in your institution. And I think this goes back to both what Randall and Ramesh said, using what resources you have to address the most pressing issues probably makes the most sense. And to not really concentrate so much on what we've been talking about in this particular session. Is we talked a lot about technology, how technology is affecting things. And it's going to continue to affect all of us, but no matter what kind of monitors or the availability of your monitors or databases and this kind of stuff. And, you know, in a few years, more and more of this is going to be right in the hand. It's going to be in your cell phone, a lot of it. So I think that picking the projects that you want to do and improve and taking it back into the whole institution may make the most sense at this point, rather than trying to figure out what advanced technology is going to impact your particular unit.
No, thank you, Tom. I'd like to ask Gowri to weigh in on this. Your talk was tremendous. It was very, very good. And you have adapted VPS to your local situation. Just great. But you had to get the resources to do that. I imagine that there were several listeners at this conference that would love to be able to figure out how you did that. Have you got any advice for them?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wetzel, for that. And thank you, Dr. Krishnamurthy, for that question. So this actually is, it's excellent because I can share my experience coming from the country of my origin, which is India. I still keep very close, interactions of, how quality improvement is being implemented there. So coming back to the whole topic of, in countries where resources are limited, how do you kind of harvest your in-house, So I want to say there are tremendous potentials in whether it's a hospital or it's a rural setting or urban setting. It's more to harvest those, little kernels of energy. And I'm actually stealing a very, very important word that I learned from my colleague in my VPS team, is to take that little grain and kernel and just make it explosive and, energize it and inject them with the energy that they're capable of. And that's exactly what we did in our team. Is every institution, regardless of where they are, I feel that they have the resources and the technology. It's basically getting them plugged in to what we are trying to achieve in a very small scale. So as a big advocate of IHI, I always believe in scaling. So start small, pilot it, and then see how that works. So, and that's what we did at the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, and it was very successfully, launched and implemented for us. So I'm going to take that same message and, give it back to Dr. Krishnamurthy to say that is a suggestion for consideration. Many of the countries, though we understand, have limited resources. I feel they have resources in different energy capacities that all can be, come together, and they can make a little project in a very successful module. So that would be my message,
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And I'd like to thank all the speakers. I'm getting the time is up for this session. We look forward to welcoming you back to the afternoon session, or at least the second session. Thank you, speakers, and thank you all who have attended. We'll see you a little later in the day.